So while Miranda gets mic'd up and makes her way to the stage, I'll just say that the partnership between these two organizations has been particularly important to us this year as we work on our shared scope, and we'll get into that in a moment, but in particular, how we standardize around things like embodied carbon. I think actually I'll invite you, Miranda, to stand at the podium for a moment and introduce the iMasons Climate Accord, and we can take it from there.
Thanks, Alex. Is this on now?
Yes.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was next door waiting for the other session to end. So, hi everyone. If we haven't met yet, my name is Miranda Gardiner. I'm the executive director of the iMasons Climate Accord. We are a nonprofit with over 270 member companies working on the goal of getting to net zero within our industry and digital infrastructure space. I am joined today by my working group chairs. We have 3 focus areas of the Climate Accord: power, equipment, and materials. So these extraordinary experts are here to give you kind of some updates on what we've been doing, what groups are involved in, and of course how this is driving the overall mission. Good to see some of friendly faces in the audience, so please be kind to them in terms of our discussion today, but of course if you are not a member with us, we invite you to join and get part of this. We're teed up on there. Okay, so let me just give you, there you go, you can see who is joining me on stage. And we're going to start our dialogue. We're going to do a bit more of a kind of round table. I'll take a seat right now, kicking it off. I think, Mike, you're our first up on here. Kind of why are you involved? Tell everyone who you are, why you're involved in sort of the long-term impacts and benefits you're seeing of being engaged in a group like this with the people that are on stage and those in the audience as well. And sure. I'm going to take a seat.
Absolutely. This working again? Yeah. All right. So Mike Donahue. I'm an ex-power trader for years and years, lived in the power space. And then about, say, 4 or 5 years ago, moved over to digital infrastructure. And moved over to digital infrastructure and worked for Cumulus. We built a nuclear power plant. We built a data center connected to the nuclear power plant. But the thing that was really important to me was I realized that I got involved with iMasons and then switched over to help with the ICA, because although iMasons is a bunch of people, the ICA is companies that can actually make a change. And what I realized was that when you look out there, although there is an energy transition right now that we are seeing in North America, especially from the digital infrastructure community, there's an energy just expansion across the globe. And that energy expansion is more power used by more people, and the amount of fossil fuels that are being used right now are just continuing to increase. And us as thought leaders really need to get out in front as communities together to help prove that we can transition to a net zero future.
Thanks, Mike. Katie from the Materials Working Group, same question, kind of what's going on in terms of all of us working together?
Sure. Hi, Katie Bachman, Director of Sustainability at Stack Infrastructure. For the iMasons on the material side, I'm really excited about some of the novel technologies we're seeing in terms of how we can scale decarbonizing the construction materials that are going into the data center facilities themselves. That's what the Materials Working Group is particularly focused on. We've seen a lot of momentum in the last 12 to 24 months on some of these technologies around novel cement solutions, as an example, lighter structural solutions that allow us to use less material become actually available within the market. And as part of the Climate Accord, colo providers, hyperscalers, AEC professionals, vendor partners are able to talk about their ability and inability to use those types of products today. And as a group, we are able to understand why we can use them and then why we cannot. And if we cannot, what are the resources that we can publish together as a group that helps to expand the market signal that we want to use these types of materials, but we can't because our contractors aren't comfortable or because there's too much risk to the owner of the building. And so I'm very excited about that momentum that the working groups have been able to come up with under the umbrella of the Climate Accord, of course, but also continuing to move us towards implementation. There is a lot of buying power in our collective group, and we've made a lot of progress and are also getting really serious about where we want to focus on moving forward. And we have some slides that we'll share in a moment talking a bit about that kind of progress as well as highlights. But broadly, that's what I'm excited about for the working group.
Fantastic. Thanks, Katie. And Alex, last but not least, you head up our equipment working group. You've also been very integral in our partnership with Open Compute, which I don't want to steal thunder from the presentation later this afternoon, but maybe you can highlight kind of both of those components in terms of how we're driving the equipment space.
Yeah, I think for the scope of the equipment working group, the iMasons Climate Accord in particular, we see how critical it is to be working within our community of vendors to the digital infrastructure industry. So we saw earlier today from other presenters the vast majority of the pie that is the carbon footprint of a data center operator that's made up of scope 3 at this point. It's all upstream scope 3, it's all embodied carbon of the materials and the equipment that go into building that data center. So from the perspective of Schneider, we are growing along with our customers. We're building more and more. We all know from every presentation at this entire summit that we are in a period of hyper growth. And right now, the environmental impact and the carbon impact of our growth is linear along with our overall growth curve. Every time we build a new facility, we're adding a proportional amount of embodied carbon. So we need to find a way to detach that and decouple that environmental impact from our ability to build new facilities and continue to grow to meet society's demands. And to do that from the perspective of the equipment working group, we need to work together to develop some standards around how we're measuring and reporting on the embodied carbon of the equipment. So at Schneider Electric, we've invested quite a lot in conducting those life cycle analyses, measuring and reporting on the embodied carbon of our equipment through EPDs. But that data we know is only of real value to our customers once we have an ecosystem of vendors who are using that, so it can start to be used as a basis of comparison in data center design. It can start to be used as a basis of comparison in data center procurement. And the iMasons and OCP together have provided a terrific venue in 2024 for us to start to look at how do we bring more vendors into that activity, how do we recruit more to engage in the activity of measuring and reporting, and then how do we move toward that standardization that we need to make the data realize its value.
Thanks, Alex. Maybe you can hit our next slide.
Sure.
Got it. To give an additional layer of perspective of what these three and their co-chairs and vice chairs do in terms of work, they also manage and herd the cats, if you will, of about groups of 15 to 20 or so experts that cross 35 to 38% of our companies involved. Our goal for next year is that about 50% of our companies will be involved in our working groups, our sub-working groups, that kind of leadership of the ICA and the direction we're going in, because we understand that kind of circular piece of this, the real full stack of what we're trying to do when it comes to decarbonization. So I can't say enough about not only their technical expertise, but the management of what they're doing and the implementation of it. So I'm not only happy to be here on stage with you, but just to give you guys that kudos, because it takes a lot. We've issued a number of case studies. They've worked hard on our maturity model, which will be published in January of next year, so please stay in touch with us, climateaccord.org to see that. They are working through next steps with the governing body on the governing body's letter and call to action on EPDs, environmental product declarations, and the importance and value of that. So a lot of work is going on here, and they are kind of hurting it. So in that vein, Alex, maybe I'm going to go back to you. What are you excited to see in the next 6 months in terms of the work that we're doing next year? How are you kind of thinking through where we're going to go with this? Yeah.
So I can speak specifically in terms of the iMasons Climate Accord. What we did in over the past year plus is work on a set of case studies. I said earlier we want to try to recruit as many vendors as we can to take part in this process. So we wanted to represent what are common methods for measuring and reporting on embodied carbon that represent different levels of maturity, sort of have different levels of difficulty in terms of entry. So we looked at a carbon input-output model, the TM65 model from CIBSE, and a full life cycle assessment with an EPD, compared them how in terms of resource intensity, both cost and human resources and the expertise required, to give vendors to this industry a lay of the land in terms of what are my options to get started, so that we could recruit more. And then Going forward, we're going to be publishing guides both for the data center industry, how to get started engaging your suppliers in this process, and from the perspective of the vendor, how to get started if you're starting from scratch on doing that measurement and reporting of embodied carbon. And then in terms of what I'm excited about for our industry going forward, I think that data center operators, especially the internet giants, have sort of had their finger hovering over the trigger in terms of requiring embodied carbon data along with RFP responses and starting to maybe attach a price to carbon that's there. And again, we need that standardization in order to sort of formalize that. But I think as we get closer to, or as we get more and more requirements and more demands and those requirements around embodied carbon in those RFPs, we're going to see a ton of progress. Schneider has seen that in our own ecosystem. We have a goal to reduce the embodied carbon from our top 1,000 suppliers by 50% by 2025. Very near-term goal, so we have our foot on the accelerator, and we've already realized 35% reduction from those top 1,000 suppliers. So we've seen that when you lay the gauntlet down, that you get reaction from your suppliers. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of hand-holding and help, but we've seen that it's possible. We hope that we've sort of proved that it's possible, and now we're looking for the same kind of requirements from our own customers.
Thanks, Alex. And I know you and Katie, in terms of the materials working group and the equipment working group, are working on a kind of crossover case study. Maybe Katie, you can get into that sort of same note. What's coming up? What are you excited for?
Sure.
In the coming months?
Alex, if you wouldn't mind just advancing the
Certainly,
slide.
yeah.
Just one more. Perfect.
Should we hear?
Yeah, and I think this is just a great way that helps visualize what we're not only have accomplished, but also what we're excited about for each of the working groups over the next 6 months. And so from the materials working group standpoint, we have made a bit of progress in terms of just identifying, again, where there are gaps in terms of resources. And then also, what type of resources can we work together to develop and publish to help fill those? And one of the case studies, as Miranda has mentioned, that we were able to publish was a case study of what does good look like. We specifically highlighted one hyperscaler's approach to doing facility level life cycle analysis at the asset level, as well as how they scale that across their portfolio and utilize it in their scope 3 carbon accounting. And that we really kind of set that as a best practice guide. And that also helped to inform the broader ICA maturity model to help companies understand what does good look like, and if I do not have the ability, the resources to be that sophisticated, what are the steps I can take to get on that journey? And then from that work, we have also been able to identify what are our priority materials that we want to focus on, again, for the data center building itself. And no surprise to anybody, those right now are concrete and steel. And again, kind of leaning into what I said before around momentum, that's because we are seeing a lot of availability in terms of market solutions to be able to decarbonize those materials, and we want to scale that adoption. In terms of, to answer the question on what we're excited about over the next 6 months, continuing to develop those resources in partnership with the equipment working group. We are developing a data center LCA best practice case study. And in the previous session, Teresa with Microsoft touched on this need, and it's kind of a perfect segue into the fact that we are thinking about it from the same perspective. What needs to be included in a full data center LCA from the equipment perspective, from the data center construction perspective, from the site work perspective, what phases should be included, what tools are available to calculate those LCAs, where we have gaps in terms of product environmental product declarations, and then again, pushing that consistent market signal for those decarb technologies needed.
Before we jump to power and get into what's going on Mike's side here, one of the things that we're looking at for 2025 sector allocation work is that they will be associated with things like CEUs. So any of you engineers, architects, we're looking to make sure that you're keeping up and maintaining, say, your ASHRAE or your
to step back, I think when we put the working group, the power working group together, I think there was a question of, all right, how big is this problem that we're facing? And right, I like the line of energy is life, and that the amount of energy being consumed will just continue to increase. And the one thing, though, that we have learned in the digital infrastructure space is that energy is fungible, right? And it doesn't have to be hydrocarbons. It can be renewable energy. But we, as leaders of the digital infrastructure space, need to set a path for what that future is going to look like, and to also set a goal. Right? We've debated this a lot internally, and this is with, again, all the largest companies in the world. Is do you want to be focused on just annual carbon-free metrics, or does it need to be 24/7, 365? Right? Like, that is a very hot debate, and that debate will really determine how far we can push this net zero future. Was nuclear to be included or not to be included? We obviously thought it should be included. Coming from a nuclear background, I was a very, very big proponent of it. But instead of just putting out another white paper on the benefits of nuclear power, right? That wasn't, like, we didn't think that would really be helpful to the industry. So instead, what we spent our time with was, how do you integrate either behind the meter or in front of the meter, doesn't matter, but SMRs, small modular reactors, that can scale with the demands of AI, right? And that one of the things that we've all found is that these large AI workloads are a little bit less latency dependent, and they're going to be moving further and further away from traditional data center markets. The further away you move from traditional data center markets, the further away you move from potentially energy, clean energy. Sometimes it can go in a variety of different ways. You actually could be closer to renewable generation, but you need large sources of reliable generation. And so that matches the nuclear SMR footprint perfectly. So what we put the white paper out that's on the ICA website is how to integrate that into these large gigascale campuses. Really, really interesting, topic, and we got a lot of feedback from all the hyperscalers and the colo providers and everybody in the data center community. If I'm thinking about what's going forward and what gets me excited is we're looking forward to the feedback we receive from the maturity model. It's going to be coming out next week. We really spent a lot of next year. Sorry. I wish it was next week. We put a tremendous amount of effort into it. There's a lot of interesting components. It is a scaling metric that's going to help people throughout their journey get to the end goals. To give, to not name names, but right, pick any of the hyperscalers. They're going to be at a very different place than maybe a colo provider will be in other parts of the world. And what we try to do is put together a scale that will help, it will benefit everybody along that journey. Because if we just focus on North America, that journey is going to look significantly different than other parts of the world. And as I go back to, I think one of the things that we really focus on is if you're just stay North American focused, you're really missing the larger problem, the larger plot that needs to be addressed.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, agreed. I know I said it before, but in terms of the work that this group does, and of course all the other volunteers, the first two rounds of review for that maturity model received over 300 comments. We'll go for one more round, so if you are a member of the Climate Accord, you'll see that come up soon. We want to get one more round of feedback, and that really is our goal. Is this is for the members, by the members. We are ensuring that all the voices are being taken into account when we develop this kind of work. As Mike said too, on the case studies, our governing body gets involved, public comments, subject matter experts. We do not just kind of say something, put it out there, and see what happens. We do all of the heavy lifting to ensure that that is a kind of agnostic piece of work that people can use and evaluate how it influences their portfolio. I'm going to call them out too. Later this afternoon, there's a group over there sitting in front of me. They'll wave again. They're the team that is running that OCPI ICA carbon disclosure label program that we've highlighted a little bit, and they'll get into it this afternoon. We're getting a little bit of the hook of 2 minutes right now, so I'm going to finish up our panel and kind of ask these three, what would you like our audience to take away from the session today, besides obviously getting involved with Climate Accord and finding us during the conference maybe what they should be kind of looking for and taking away from the OCP conference in general. Katie, maybe I'll start with you in the middle here.
Sure. I mean, always a soft plug for iMasons in terms of how to get involved, but we've been talking a lot about, whether it's this conference or we were all at YADA last week, about how the carbon conundrum of our industry lives at every level of the stack, right? And so my plug is carbon is everyone's problem to solve. And if you know that, but you don't know how to solve it, or you know it and you do, or you didn't know that, then find a group, whether it be in your corner of this industry, to figure out how what you do can help reduce carbon intensity of software onto hardware, onto data center facilities themselves, and the broader infrastructure that it supports.
Make it very quick. Just to echo that, think about where you are in the ecosystem of all the other players that are involved. If you're a vendor, you need to collaborate with other vendors in certain ways. You need regulators, you need utilities to cooperate in certain ways so that you can buy the renewable power that you need. So we are all part of a bigger picture. We all need to come together to solve a complex problem when it comes to carbon. So collaboration is key. Join the iMasons Climate Accord.
I swear I didn't pay any. Mike, finish this up.
Sure. To quote Dean, the founder of iMasons, right? He said last week that we are potentially moving backwards in carbon instead of forwards, and we collectively need to join as a group to move this industry and the whole world forward. We have the loudest voices of any industry out there, and we can make the most action. So please, again, join the ICA and